Welcome everyone, Costini here with a discussion about some of the best short campaigns to play in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Now, the legendary lords on this list are not necessarily bad in any way, shape, or form. In fact, they have quite a lot on offer. But either because of climate suitability, race design, or just overall campaign design, these legendary lords are not necessarily well suited for a very long campaign, not suited for world domination, but you can certainly have a great deal of fun playing them in a shorter campaign. Let's start with Zhao Ming at number 5, the Iron Dragon. And a lot of the things I'll say here can certainly apply to his sister as well. I just think Zhao Ming is much better than his sister in a campaign right now. It wasn't the case in Realms of Chaos, though. Even in Realms of Chaos, I think Zhao Ming always had a lot of potential. It was just the fact between Snakegate being destroyed, Miao Ying's AI not being able to handle the Chaos invasion over there, it created a lot of issues. But in Immortal Empires, Zhao Ming is certainly better than his sister in virtually every way that does count. So he gets plus 15 armor for all melee units faction Y. Now, to give you an idea of how ridiculous this is, you gotta look at this the situation. Jade Warriors have 80 armor by default. Increasing that to 95 faction-wide as a tier 1 unit, as one of your most basic units that can recruit from every barracks, is pretty insane. That is a ridiculous level of armor. And for more, he gets a minus 25% upkeep for melee units in his army. And also, he gets maximum cargo capacity plus 20%. So he can make a lot of money early on in his campaign. He's really all about playing with a melee army, which certainly works very well right now. And because of the cargo capacity, he will be able to earn quite a bit more money a lot easier than the alternative, which is his sister. Furthermore, and he also gets desert armor. That's an additional 10 armor for melee units in his army. So you're looking at plus 25 armor for all melee units in Zhao Ming's army. That is a ridiculous degree of armor that you can get. In fact, I think it's some of the highest level of armor you can get in any army for any legendary lord for any race in the entire game. We're talking here of a level that surpasses like even Warriors of Chaos. Now, Warriors of Chaos certainly have their own advantages, absolutely, but the fact that Zhao Ming does have that really is beneficial in this campaign. The reason it's so beneficial is like Jade Warriors are already very, very tough to kill. He makes them even tougher, but crucially, because of that extra armor, he will do much better in auto-resolve. So being able to skip a lot of the pointless battles makes the campaign a lot more enjoyable for the vast majority of people. It also just means you're taking fewer casualties in general during the course of a campaign. Now, the problems for Cathay in a long campaign are, for both Zhao Ming and Miao Ying, is that the climate suitability for Cathay is incredibly limited. So they can only they only have temperate, savanna, and desert. Basically, if you're playing a Cathay campaign, you can take pretty much all of Cathay, no problem, but then you're going to have severe limitations because the only other territory that's really suitable is Khemri. Certainly, if you can make your way to Khemri, all the better, right? There's a great deal of potential there. Then you have Tylea, Estalia, and basically the Empire. So that's the only territory on the campaign map that you can settle, which means that your long-term potential in a Cathay campaign without mods is going to be incredibly limited. Sure, there are mods that do improve this, but by default, if you're playing a Cathay campaign, it's probably best to play a short Cathay campaign as opposed to a very long world domination campaign. Hopefully something that will be changed. I think of all of the Warhammer 3 races that were interested in Warhammer 3 at launch, Cathay is the best one, but they do have a lot of strings attached to them. And number 4, we have Grombrindal, the White Dwarf. While the dwarves are certainly one of the worst races in the game, Grombrindal's campaign works surprisingly well in Warhammer 3 because he has a lot of advantages that actually make up for a significant number of shortcomings that the dwarves do have. He also has kind of a straightforward campaign, at least initially, which is beat up the Skaven over here in the initial province, beat them up in the Gorge, and then go beat up Malekith. Pretty straightforward, pretty clear. Then things do get interesting with Valkia, Katab, the sisters, Tarox, potentially Alith Anar if you decide to deal with the grudge in the easiest possible way. Though it isn't necessarily too important to deal with it. Oddly enough, I think the grudges have kind of bugged out here to a certain extent. But there is certainly a great deal of potential during this campaign early on. And here's the thing about Grombrindal. His faction effects give him weapon strength when fighting against elves. He has an evasion chance when using the Underway, and he can call upon the power of the ancestor gods. Now, in terms of his Lord effects, he's getting leadership for his army, melee defense for Quarrelers, and Iron Drake units. He gets Mountain Strider on top of the movement range you can get through the blue skill line. So he's getting a lot of campaign movement range here, a ridiculous amount. And he gets a lot of armor piercing, further melee defense when defending, armor piercing weapon damage when defending. Grombrindal has no fear ability, a huge amount of vigor loss reduction, and he can call upon the ancestor gods. Now, Valea is the best one by far. This one will reduce corruption by a significant amount since you're dealing with chaos. That this is very welcome, and it will also give him a huge amount of casualty replenishment for his own army. And while this won't make up for the issues of the dwarf race as a whole, it will certainly help Grombrindal's campaign in a very, very substantial part, at least early on. And that's the key point. Now, there are, of course, other benefits, but it's a straightforward campaign with a great deal of power behind it. Now, on top of that, he has 4 quest items. Now, the quest battles themselves aren't necessarily too difficult, but the crucial point is not about the items themselves, is the huge amount of money you can get pretty early on in a campaign as Grombrindal through these quest battles that he does have. So Grombrindal can actually be fairly rich. Furthermore, he has his special blue skill line, which gives him income from 3 tariffs, a huge amount of campaign movement range for all characters. Like, look at Grombrindal, he's looking at 30% campaign movement range. He can get 6% casualty replenishment for all characters faction-wide, global recruitment, recruitment cost, recruitment rank, and lightning strike. So Grombrindal is a really powerful legendary lord. In fact, I would say in terms of how good of a legendary lord he is for his faction, I'd say he's probably flat out the best legendary lord in terms of like campaign benefits, because getting that kind of casualty replenishment rate, that recruit rank, that recruit cost is a fairly huge deal on a campaign. Now, Grombrindal is probably is very good to confederate if you're playing dwarf campaign. Now, the downside of his entire campaign is, while short term it can be a lot of fun, long term there's going to be some issues. You can't colonize the cast wastes, and you are obviously going to have a lot of issues from the cast wastes over here that you're going to be dealing with. Like, you've got Bellicor, you've got Sigvald, so you do have issues in terms of the long-term prospects of this campaign, but certainly can be a very, very fun campaign to do for like 20, 30, 40 turns or so as you're dealing with some really powerful legendary lords, but you do have the tools needed to succeed against them. Bit of a downside that you are, or a huge downside, that you're starting far away from the other dwarf legendary lords, and actually getting to them is going to be something of a problem in this campaign, but for short term, it is a great campaign. And number 3, we have Lokhir Fellheart of the Dark Elves. Lokhir certainly utilizes a lot of the strengths that the Dark Elves do have. While I certainly wouldn't say he's the best campaign of the Dark Elves, it's certainly a really good one overall. Morathi has a better long-term campaign, but in terms of early game potential, in terms of a short campaign, Lokhir wins by a landslide. He does start with a Black Arc, and it's a special kind of Black Arc that gives campaign movement range, casualties captured post-battle within sphere of influence, and 20% income from sacking settlements. Keep in mind that income from sacking settlements, because it is going to matter a huge amount. On top of that, you get the sacrifice to Rema, which gives you 50% extra income from sacking settlements. Black Arc Grove campaign movement range, it gets to pretty damn absurd levels very, very, very quickly in Lokhir. And you have the ability from turn 1 of recruiting Black Ark Corsairs, because you start with a Black Ark. Actually, you don't just start with a Black Ark, you start with 2. Yeah, Lokhir is pretty damn absurd on a huge number of levels in his campaign. Like, he gets one of the best early game armies in the game, flat out. He has a huge amount of income that he can get very early in his campaign. He has a great starting position over here. Well, not necessarily a great starting position in terms of the province, but great in terms of the fact that you're starting in Cathay. And Cathay is a pretty damn good place to start with. It does kind of suck to have to deal with the Dead Flank fleet, because it would be a lot more fun if you're marching west into the Celestial Lake from the very start and the Nagchang Basin, as opposed to having to deal with the Jade River Delta. But still, is a really fun and entertaining campaign. The Cathayan situation itself, like just the way Creative Assembly designed Cathay in Immortal Empires, it certainly ended up being a really fun place to have a campaign. Great variety of terrain, great variety of opponents to deal with, and a bunch of choices to deal with. And this campaign can certainly be played in the long term. Like, you have a bunch of climate that is suitable, so you can really work with that. Now, while you may not want to head west in this campaign because wasteland and mountains are uninhabitable, what you can do, and maybe what you should do in every campaign as Lokhir, is take the sea lane over here and end up in Lustria and conquer, well, basically all of it, more or less, during the course of your campaign. Sure, Akarf, who is the true master of Lustria over here, and then go deal with all of the High Elven factions. The problem with this campaign is, beyond the fact that you don't have the same kind of control benefits that Marathi has in her campaign, the Celestial Corruption really does help Marathi. The big issue is that you have to wipe out all of the other High Elven factions, and given Wasteland and Mountains are not inhabitable for you, wiping out someone like Emmerich, and Emmerich has a great deal of survivability in his campaign, wiping him out or wiping out Teclis can be something of an issue. So not necessarily a great long-term campaign, though still very playable, don't get me wrong on that. But from a short-term perspective, it is an amazing campaign to experience in Warhammer 3. And number 2, we have Grom the Paunch of the Greenskins. Grom is an absurdly powerful Legionary Lord. Gromgor might achieve more in his overall campaign, but Grom is absolutely ridiculous. His DLC is the one that brought the Greenskin rework, which made the Greenskins from one of the worst races in Warhammer 2 to one of the best races in Warhammer 2 and then 3. The thing about Grom is that he can cook, and the cooking benefits are ridiculous. 10% income from all buildings, 8 control, global recruitment duration, income from raiding potentially, or income from sacking and looting. It is ridiculous. You can literally print money over here with Ocean Clams, and all it does, it requires you to sack a Bretonnian settlement, which you can do from turn 1 of this campaign. Grom is simply on a completely different level. He starts with a hero that gives him replenishment, which is always very, very nice to have. However, there are certainly drawbacks in Grom's campaign. Now, for a short-term campaign, this is an amazing one, because you can colonize Ulf-1, and Ulf-1 is a great area if you can take it and hold it, because it gives you a lot of potential during the course of your campaign, economic potential. And it's certainly fun to pick a fight with Alfarian, Tyrion, Alariel, Nakari, Noctilus, and beat every single one of them. However, here's the issue if you're playing a campaign as Grom the Paunch. You have a great deal of strength. You have a great deal of potential. You can literally print money. You have so much money, you won't even know what to do with it. But there is a major problem, and this is a problem that makes a lot of campaigns suffer, and that issue is climate. Now, Grom's climate suitability is not too bad. The problem is he doesn't really have a lot of territory next to him that is suitable beyond Ulthuan itself. There are some mountains, but you don't necessarily want to take them. Picking a fight with Alpha Lorem is generally a really bad idea in your campaign. You could certainly do it, but it will slow you down in a significant fashion. It is my perspective that if you're playing a campaign as Grom, you just play it to achieve a very quick victory against Ulthuan, and after that you just end up feeling fairly frustrated actually as a player, because you have a really powerful legendary lord of a powerful race, great faction effects, good lord effects too, and yet expanding past Ulthuan is going to feel incredibly frustrating. Now, I've played an entire campaign as Grom where I conquered Bretonnia, but I realized that for all the fun I could have in like 30, 40, 50 turns, just building a massive empire as him, while certainly possible, it was not gonna be a great experience. So Grom has an amazing campaign in the short term, not so much in the long term. And number 1, it is Alith Anar. Now, Alith Anar, like all the other legendary lords on this list, is pretty good, but he does have his own limitations in the campaign. But it is a very focused campaign at the same time. See, his climate suitability is actually probably some of the worst, if not the literal worst in the entire game. He can only find suitable terrain in frozen and wasteland territory. Now, thankfully, there is plenty of that to go around playing a frozen territory where he starts, because there's the entirety of Nagrand, so it's not as frustrating as Grom. But if you're trying to build a massive empire in the campaign map, you can certainly make it work with Alith Anar. The High Elves certainly have the economy to make it function, but again, it is going to be slower, it is going to be frustrating. But in the short term, Alith Anar is absurdly good. Every single one of his armies gets a stock stance, so every single one of his armies can potentially ambush the enemy. He also has an underway stance as well available to him. Furthermore, he gets campaign move range for all characters. He gets Invocation of Morai Hag, which gives him the ability of summoning an assassin hero that has a 100% chance to assassinate, and that works on legendary lords as well. So hey, you're struggling with Valkia or Sigvald or Bellicor, no problem, just summon one of those heroes and eliminate them completely. That is a great deal of power that Alith Anar does have in his campaign. A really huge amount of power that he does have. And that's just the faction effects. His lord effects give him 50% upkeep for Shadow Walkers and Shadow Warriors. He gets the unique Shadow Walker units, and he starts with the ability of recruiting them with the camp that he gets over here. So you can recruit these units. Now, unfortunately, they do take 2 turns, and they're pretty expensive to actually recruit. But if you get a full stack of these guys, you will decimate every single other legendary lord around you. Furthermore, Alith Anar, he reduces enemy leadership. He causes fear on his enemies. He gets ammunition for Shadow Warriors and Shadow Walkers. He gets post-battle loot and come from sacking and looting settlements, which is always great to have for a short campaign. He gets Renegade, which gives all of his armies 12 missile strength. He gets control in his own territory. He also has 2 quest items. One of them does require for you to go here to get the Shrine of Cain, but that's not really too big of an issue. Like, just take out Sinnelleos, then sail over here, take the Shrine of Cain, maybe take Tor Unlock, sell all of that to Alariel, and then sail back. Get the military alliance that you want with Alariel, sail back and deal with everything here. You will have to deal with Sinnelleos, Bellicor, and of course Malekith in the course of this campaign, and Tarax as well. And then you'll end up having to fight Valkia. This is a fairly amazing campaign because you're dealing with a lot of powerful legendary lords, but you have all the tools needed to succeed. In point of fact, I would say like his starting position isn't necessarily all that great because you're very exposed from all angles, but that's what adds to this campaign. You're exposed, you're not in a great position, you're surrounded on all sides. Well, we can attack in every direction, I suppose. That is Alith Anar's mentality. it can certainly be a fairly brutal experience to deal with as Alith Anar. But if you do succeed, it is a very fulfilling campaign to play in a very significant number of ways, I would argue. It has a lot on offer. You have a lot of early game resources with the missions you have. Now, unfortunately, these missions are random, so you might want to start a campaign several times over until you get some good missions that you want, like, having a mission against this particular army here. Yeah, that's pretty good, though the rewards in this case are not necessarily that great, just influence and money. You probably want growth, but there's a lot of potential, an enormous amount of potential in this campaign. Lots of options, lots of ways this can go really badly as well. Like, this is genuinely a campaign you can lose if you're not playing it correctly, but if you do know what you're doing, it can feel so amazing to succeed in this campaign. So you have a powerful Legionary Lord, lots of money, lots of resources, powerful armies, and yet you are dealing with powerful foes. Genuinely, in a lot of ways, this is one of the best campaigns that Creative Assembly has ever made in Total War. And I'm not sure how much of that was planned in Warhammer 3, to be quite honest with you. Anyway, Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. If you do enjoy my content, consider supporting me via PayPal and Patreon. I'd very much appreciate it. Stay tuned for more.